Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and I have another block for you today. This one is called Orion's Wheel, and this is another 12-inch block, and I made this one with Lori Holt fabrics. So this is a variety of fabrics from several of her lines. This block is made with flying geese units and half square triangles, so it's really easy to go together. And it's a good beginner block. So anyway, I hope you'll stay with me and I'll show you how to make Orion's wheel. Here are the fabrics that I've chosen for the Orion's wheel block. Now these are all nutmeg fabrics from Basic Gray. And for A, you'll need two 5-inch squares. For B, you also need two 5-inch squares, and you'll want to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of those two. For C, you need four 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles. D is also four 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles. E is four 2.5 inch squares, and F is 16 2.5 inch squares. And you can also draw a diagonal line on the back of the F squares if you want to. These will be for making the flying geese units. So I'm going to adjust the camera and get started making the Orion's wheel block. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is to make the flying geese units, and I need to change the foot on my machine. This is the foot that came with the machine, so it's a little open toe foot, and I'm going to change to a modern 1/4 inch foot. And here's the base for the foot. And then here is the foot itself. Okay, so I've got the C and the D rectangles and the F squares, and I'm going to make flying geese units with these. So I'm just going to start with the C. You can start with it with whatever you want, and I'm going to be chain piecing all of these together to make things go a little bit faster. And I'm also not going to draw a diagonal line because I'm pretty accurate at sewing these 2.5 inch squares on the diagonal from here to here. Now I also have a piece of glow lime tape here, and this is actually set a 1/2 inch so that there will be a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the needle to this outside edge of the tape. Now if I want to do a 1/4 inch, I can use this guide right here, but I'm going to pretty much just ignore that. Now it is more accurate if you do draw your diagonal line. And let me adjust my stitch length a little bit here. I was sewing, I was actually making a purse yesterday. So all of my settings are a little bit different. Okay, so that looks good and straight. The hardest part is determining which is the right side of this background fabric. This is a grunge, and the pattern on it's very subtle. And I'm going to lengthen my stitch length just a little bit because that looks a little too tight. I mean, the stitches aren't too tight. The stitches are too close together. There's too many stitches per inch. There we go. That feels better. Okay, now I'm going to take my D rectangles and just keep going. So I am stitching from the center, top center to the bottom right hand corner of this F square. Okay, now I'm going to cut these all apart, and then I'm going to trim a 1/4 inch away from the seam line that I've sewn, the stitching line. So I'm going to switch scissors here. Okay, so we have the stitch line there. I'm going to trim a 1/4 inch away from that. It doesn't have to be completely accurate. And then I'll press it back and we'll have that much. So I'm going to go ahead and do this to all of them. Okay, so here I have them all pressed back. So this is what they look like. So now I'm going to sew the squares onto the other side, going from the top center to the lower left hand corner this time. Cut these apart, and then I'll trim and press and they'll be done. Okay, so there's the completed flying geese unit. So I have all of these done. Next thing I need to do is to make half square triangles, and those will be the A and the B squares. So we're going to put those right sides together. Now this fabric is directional, so if that matters to you, you'll want to watch that. Now I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch away from this drawn line on both sides. You can pin these in place first if that helps you. In place, there you go. And for these larger squares I did draw the diagonal line because it is harder to keep that going straight where there's a long stance like that. Okay, now I'm going to cut on the drawn line. And then I'll have 4 half square triangles here. Now I'm going to press these open And then I need to trim these down so that they measure 4.5 inches, so that these are going to be a little bit larger than 4.5. So I need to trim these down. So I'm going to press, and then I'll trim them down. Okay, so here they are at this stage, and then I'll trim them down and we'll be ready to lay out the block. Okay, I have all of the pieces to make the Orion's wheel block. So we have half square triangles, the flying geese units, and we have the E squares. And I'm going to start in the center of the block, and we're going to use the half square triangles and make a pinwheel. So we're just going to rotate those all around. And as you can see, these fabrics are directional, so you can change things around if you want to. Now, to me, it doesn't really make any difference. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so now I have them all, they're all facing the same direction. So I've got that, and then we're going to put the half square, then we're going to put the flying geese on, and the yellow ones are going to go next to the bird blocks, and then the large print is going to go next to the dark. So they're going to alternate all the way around. Just like this. Of course, you can rearrange these however you want. And then we have the E squares, and they're going to go in the corners. Okay, so here we have the layout. So I'm going to sew them all into rows. So we'll have 4 different rows, and I'll sew all the rows, and then I will sew them together to complete the block. Now when I sew these two pieces together, the 2 flying geese units, they go together like this. So I want to align those seams, and I'm going to fold this seam back just so I can nest it, and I'm not going to sew it that way. I'm just going to hold it there, and I want to place a pin, and that way I know it's in the right spot. I'm going to let that seam go back to where it was. Okay, so here's row 1. And there it is. So I'm going to go ahead and lay that down and sew row 2. In this one, there is a seam that can nest together, so I'm going to go ahead and nest that. Okay, so we have these two sections. They need to go together like this, and this seam is going to nest. So I'm going to just nest that in. Okay, so here is row 2. Okay, so I'm ready to sew the rows together. So I've pressed the seams in opposite directions, and I do have points to match. So I'm going to put a pin through the point on this row and then in through the point of the next row. And then line that up and pin it in place. And then I'm just going to pin at each seam. There aren't points in every single seam, but there are in some. So I'm going to try and get these all lined up, but I'm not going to agonize over it if I don't get them exactly perfect. Okay, let's see how that turned out. Not too bad. Okay, so first 2 rows, there we go, first 2 rows. Then I'm going to add row 3. And this one I'm going to start in the middle. There's a lot of points coming together in the middle. Okay, so here is our finished block. So I think it turned out pretty well. What I did, there's a lot of points coming together, especially here in the center. So I pressed this seam open. In fact, I pressed all of these seams open, and because we got a lot of points here in all of these sections. So that helps a little bit to make it a little bit flatter. It might have worked better if I had these two seams also pressed open, but I didn't. So it doesn't really matter in the long run, because once it's in your quilt and it's quilted, that's not going to be that much of a problem. But when you do have 8 seams coming together right here, if you don't flatten that as much as you can, even with a long arm machine, it can be impossible to get over that bump. So it is important to get that as flat as you can. So here is Orion's wheel. Okay, that is it for Orion's wheel. Here's the block I just completed, and I think it looks pretty nice. I'm really happy with that. And then here's my sample block made with the Lori Holt fabric. So this is Lori Holt fabric. This is nutmeg. So they're pretty similar as far as color ways. You know, they're blues and yellows. So I just followed the example from my sample for the fabric that I picked out of the nutmeg. So now this background is a grunge here, whereas the background on this one is a Bella solid. So it's different backgrounds, so different fabrics, a little bit different look, but you know, the same pattern. So anyway, this block would look good in any fabric you choose, and it would be a good block to use some of your scraps with. So I hope you'll give it a try. If you like this video, please click that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and click that notification bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes up. And in the meantime, I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.